Live via Twitter Spaces, this is a What's Up the Sports podcast for Monday, the 1st of May. I'm Randy Kure. Thank you so much for joining us. You could find this episode on most podcast platforms, as well as YouTube. For details, log on to whatsuppodcast.blogspot.com. We are going to go heavy for this episode on playoff hockey this evening, particularly the Bruins' epic collapse against the Florida Panthers. The Seattle Kraken made team history and bounced the defending Stanley Cup champions in the process. The Edmonton Oilers are also heading to the second round, but how much pressure is on the likes of McDavid, Draisaitl, and Coach Jay Woodcock to have a successful playoff campaign? In rapid fire, Rick Bowness released some pressure after his Jets were eliminated by the Golden Knights. Darryl Sutter is out in Calgary and not related to hockey, and a potential landmark job interview may be taking place for the Raptors head coaching vacancy. Joining us for the roundtable, I can imagine he is on fumes, having worked the Leafs Lightning playoff series at Scotiabank Arena. Tony Antoniou is back in the house. Tony, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you, man?
Not too bad. And making a return to the podcast for the first time since the dog days of last summer, he is a dear friend of the show. Prince Matalia is back with us from his humble abode in North Carolina. Prince, good to see you. And for those of you who are watching on YouTube, both Prince and myself are rocking Matt Sundin jerseys. Prince, I like your style, my man.
Thanks for having me, man. It feels so good. It feels relief, man. Dad, we can watch the game together, man. He's watching it with me in heaven, man. I'm so happy. You probably give him a toast right now. I'm just, a lot of emotions, man. I feel great.
Well, it was a long time coming for Leaf fans. I mean, it was the first time in 19 years since the Leafs made it to the second round. We're definitely going to be talking about that. But guys, I did want to start with an interesting story. Now, Tony and myself are big Toronto FC fans. Tony is a season seat holder for TFC. And St. Louis City SC is an expansion club in MLS. And they have just announced a section of their stadium will be designated for fans and their dogs. It's going to be a section where fans can bring their dear pup to the game. And it's, from what I understand, is the first time such accessibility is being offered. I don't know if the two of you are dog owners, but do you actually need to bring your dog to a game? They can't spend one afternoon at home.
I am a dog owner, and I would not take this psycho anywhere in public. That's for sure. She'd be barking and try and just get at other dogs. No, but some people are really attached to their pups. So yeah, I can see people doing that. It's not a big deal. I think it's kind of cool. Not every game, but I wouldn't. But if I could, I'd maybe take her to one or two. But it just seems like it would be a waste of time for the person who's trying to actually watch the game and cares about it. When you'll be worried about your dog the whole time. But depends how good the owners are.
Yeah. I mean,
apparently I suck because mine's not the greatest behaved dog. But
so
anyway, I digress.
Your pup is going to basically start causing a ruckus, basically like the supporter section of various soccer stadiums. Is that what you're trying to say?
She would bark the whole time, and you wouldn't be able to hear the supporter section. Guaranteed.
Prince, how about you? I'm assuming that it's not going to be the most April fresh smelling section in the stadium. I mean, would you even contemplate having a dog come to a sporting event that you're going to?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting topic. I mean, I'm not a dog owner myself, and it sounds like from the scenario itself, it's it's a section where it's right next to where people are actually sitting watching the games. It's not a separate section where it's secluded, where people can actually kind of walk their dogs, like maybe on an AstroTurf, or kind of just hang out with their dogs and chill. Which for us who are really, deep sports fans, it kind of lose the point of like going to the game in the first place, like Tony was saying. But I don't see it being actually a big deal if they're actually going there and just hanging out. Maybe they're in a place where it's like standalone tickets, and they're just hanging out, having a beer, just kind of chit-chatting, socializing. If they have a separate section, I think it's a cool feature for a stadium. But if they're just hanging out like near people who are actually really intensely into the game, like myself, I don't want to be around that. And I think it's probably not a good idea for them to bring their own dog as well. So it's just for hygiene and just for various situations. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool that they're starting to experiment with it. I'll say that.
Yeah, well, I mean, forget experiment. This is a full out plan, and I mean, we have seen one-offs where teams have bring your dog to the game day, but first time it's a full-time fixture. And I don't know. I mean, you think after 2 hours or so, Rover wants to go for a walk. I can only imagine what kind of mess that section would be. Forget about the beer cans and all the.
Well, that was what I was thinking. Most stadiums don't have in-out privileges anymore, so they are going to have to pee or poo within that hour and a half. So what the hell happens then? Where are you allowed to take them? Even as a dog owner, I would hate them just going right there. So yeah, I'm sure they've got that stuff figured out, though.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like if they had a section where it's like a standalone section, or have a place where they have, it's like almost like a dog walking area, or a place where people are just socializing near like a bar. And there's people some people just want to go watch the game and just hang out. They're barely watching the game, but they're just there to hang out, really, and they just want to be with their dog. So I would say that to be a pretty cool location, pretty cool feature at a stadium, at an arena. But you definitely it'd be an area where if they poop, you can just toss it out in the trash right there. But not in like a proper sitting area, like in the 200 section. I wouldn't want anybody's dog next to me. That'd be kind of weird. Being a dog owner would be kind of weird as well for that situation.
Yeah, I just hope that the wind is wafting in the opposite direction than where I am. In relation to the dog section at St. Louis SC. So what are they going to think of next? But guys, let's get down to business, shall we? And it's been quite a first round for the NHL playoffs, and to near and dear to our hearts, and in our neck of the woods, the Toronto Maple Leafs have made the second round for the first time since 2004. Defeating the 3-time consecutive Stanley Cup finalists, Tampa Bay Lightning. They, of course, won the Cup 2 out of those 3 years. Tony was working the Leaf Lightning playoff series at Scotiabank Arena. What was that scene like, Tony? It must have been one of the wildest you've ever experienced.
Well, the clinching game was in Tampa, but the atmosphere, I mean, I always tease that Leaf games are like morgues and libraries, but in the playoffs, it's a whole different animal altogether. It's a pretty raucous crowd, pretty loud, really energetic. It's just I'm not used to it during Leaf games. You're spending a regular season game there, but look, it's huge. It's a huge deal. 19 years, the fans deserve it. That core deserves it. I think the mental hurdle that they've overcome here is massive, and you're getting the benefit of a non-delusional non-Leaf fan here. I'm giving you an objective opinion. I think they can march to the Stanley Cup final just because of the mental hurdle alone. I really do feel that. I think they needed it. I think there's going to be a belief now. There's certainly areas in their game that they're going to have to improve. Tampa dominated a lot of that series, so we can't overlook that. They've got to be more disciplined, stay out of the penalty box, and I'm sure Sheldon Keefe is having those conversations with the team. prior to the beginning of the series, but that mental hurdle is so huge. And we've seen it before. Tampa went through it, the Washington Capitals, getting over the Pittsburgh Penguin hurdle, finally getting to the Stanley Cup. I think this is where this team is at now.
Well, before we loop in Prince, I'm kind of curious, over the past couple of years, it did seem that Leaf crowds have been getting a little bit more loud. There's a little bit more excitement. Obviously, for the first time in decades, Hart Trophy winner was a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and that was Austin Matthews. You've worked at Scotiabank, obviously, for a number of years. Have you noticed a shift in tempo amongst the fans, or is it still a little bit of a library?
Like I said, regular season is always the same, very blah. But yeah, listen, I think guys like Marner and Matthews, they attract a younger audience because they're hip, for lack of a better term. They come in. It's the way they dress, the way they act. They're very candid. They're honest people. When they're being interviewed, they're a young generation, so I guess they do attract a younger crowd. But honestly, working there all season long, it doesn't really change. But the playoffs is just a completely different story.
Yeah, no, and obviously the first 3 games that were in Toronto, that there definitely was a lively crowd. Maybe not so much the first game, but Prince, I mean, you are rocking Matt Sundin's jersey deep in the heart of, Carolina, but I mean, you've been so removed from Canada for all these years. You obviously are over the moon to experience a Leaf playoff series win. I mean, like, how close were you to the action? I'm assuming that you were watching every game, as despite living in Carolina there.
Oh man, I've been catching every single game. I mean, I don't want to shove it in Tony's face. He's a Toronto kid. I love him to death. But it breaks my heart that he's not a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, being a Toronto kid. But I'm glad, he's holding it down at Scotiabank Center. And I'm glad he's giving us, some well wishes, because I mean, it's our year. And it really is amazing. I've been watching it closely. We've been watching it as kids, even Tony has, of course, growing up in Toronto, the 90s, the blunders in the 2000s. We're just had so many years where we're expected to go somewhere. And especially, of course, not being able to get a damn first round, being 3-1 up 3-1. I mean, we got that monkey off the back. That just feels so amazing. I don't know if you saw me on Twitter, bro, but I was like fuck the Leafs in game 5, in what, the third period, and then in the second period in game 6, I'm like, after they tied it up, or I think it was in the first period, I forgot when they tied them up, but yeah, when they tied it up, I was just completely pissed off. I'm like, hopefully the gods come through and save the team, and lo and behold, take it to OT, captain Toronto. Captain Canada, he actually ends up scoring in overtime, and it felt so amazing. It's just amazing. It's just an amazing relief, to be a Toronto fan.
Well, and you have to wonder who had the most pressure to get over that hump and win that first playoff series. I mean, you have the one of the most elite players in the league in Austin Matthews, and I mean, Mitch Marner is not that far off. John Tavares obviously left the island, New York Islanders, to come to Toronto, his hometown team. I mean, how many times did we see that picture of him as a kid sleeping in Leaf pajamas all those years ago? You think about Brendan Shanahan, you think about Sheldon Keefe. Was there somebody, Prince, that if you had to pick one person, the pressure was the most to have a series win against Tampa?
Oh, I mean, there's a lot of people on that team, certainly. I mean, I think the easy choice is Kyle Dubas, of course, being the GM and being the young GM who took over from somebody who's been extremely successful over the years with New Jersey Devils. But I would say, like, I think it was after the series started to go, further into like game 3, game 4, the feeling became to be Sheldon Keefe. I think Sheldon Keefe had the most pressure to me, aside from Kyle Dubas, because Sheldon Keefe is, he's taken this team and a team that should have been up and won 3-1 after being 3-1 last season. I think his job was on the line this year to be able to get them further into the playoffs and win this first round, get that monkey off the back. I really think he was the guy with the most pressure. They were up and we lost game 5 at home. We looked really good in game 5 too, stick checking and, being really physical. And we kind of were like almost didn't want to be denied in that game. As John Tavares has said in post game, like, we didn't want to be denied, which is a new mindset for the Leafs in playoffs, especially being up and kind of, always throwing away the series historically. So I think Sheldon Keefe certainly got some help from Kyle Dubas with the roster changes, which we'll probably go into. But I think Sheldon Keefe really needed to show that he could be composed and compete against a guy like John Cooper, who's probably a Hall of Fame coach maybe at some point, especially with a great team that's been making it to the finals the last couple of years. So Sheldon Keefe to me is the guy with the most pressure in that Toronto Maple Leafs organization, aside from Kyle Dubas.
He definitely made some big moves. I mean, obviously, what do you do with Michael Bunting, Matthew Nyes? I mean, how much can you actually put on a 20-year-old kid who was in a dorm room a couple of months ago, and has
unbelievable,
and has really had such a great start to these playoffs. I mean, Tony, being a Penguins fan, Matt Murray led the Penguins to the Cup. He did not have a success twice, and didn't have a successful run in Ottawa. Comes to Toronto, has just been an absolute disaster. I mean, now he's at a point where he's the third string goalie. I mean, is it a surprise? I mean, hindsight is what it is, Tony. I get it, but Joseph Woll is the backup now. And I mean, how does that happen when you're a 2-time Cup champion?
Well, your greatest ability is your availability, and that's been Matt Murray's problem since 2017. It's been an endless line of injuries. I know you're not supposed to use injuries as an excuse, but if you're not there and you're not in the swing of things and you don't have a routine going, especially if you're a goalie, it's trouble. It's trouble. He lost his father a few years ago, and he was never the same after that. It was a big loss for him. And I remember just, reading articles on it and what he meant to him and stuff. But overall, the injuries for Matt Murray have been piling up nonstop. So that's probably the reason why he is where he is right now, because you can't trust him. You can't rely on him at this point. That's my best explanation. I think that is the explanation. He had a pretty decent stretch at one point. Both goalies were going okay, but Matt Murray just does what Matt Murray does, and that's get hurt. The poor guy has just not been able to be healthy. And I don't know if that's partly not enough work on his part on stretching and different aspects that a goalie needs to do to be prepared. I have no idea, because I can explain to you the goaltending position, but the greatest ability is availability, and Matt Murray is not right now.
Do you think he'll be able to either find what he had in Pittsburgh? Do you think another team may take a flyer on him? I mean, I know that I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but is Matt Murray's days numbered in the NHL? Because it seems to be the case in Toronto.
sorry, I don't know if they're numbered in the NHL necessarily. I mean, he could probably be one of those journeymen who latches onto a team, backup role, whatever. But is he going to be a starting goaltender for a Stanley Cup champion moving forward? That'll be very difficult. Tough to say because just his body seems to be falling apart. And that's the key to what's wrong with Matt Murray right now.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
I could see him being a contributor on a part-time basis, maybe late in the playoff runs if he wants to continue his career. I do think the injuries has plagued him quite a bit late in his career. He really was excited to be a Leaf, especially from being from the area, being from Ontario. So I know Tony's a huge fan because he played for the Penguins with a lot of success. But aside from the injuries, I think a lot of the reasons why he hasn't played and Samsonov has gotten the nod, certainly injuries is the primary reason, is because Samsonov has had better stats with games tied. And Murray's been known to be a good goaltender when they're in the lead. I mean, when you're playing on those Pittsburgh teams, I know Tony loves hearing this, they're always front runners, especially, being on a really good offensive team. So, and Samsonov has been pretty good. I mean, obviously he was playing kind of crappy for us, so it really scared us. But he's a better goaltender, apparently, statistically, when the game is tied. So that was a huge reason. I did not expect him to be third string. But to answer your question, kind of circle back, is I think he'd be maybe a contributor on a part-time basis in a Stanley Cup run, but I don't think he can be a long-term goaltender for any organization at this point.
So Prince, being in North Carolina currently, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you what the scene was like for the Hurricanes. I'm not really sure how close you are, or even if you are in Raleigh altogether. But the Hurricanes, they disposed of the New York Islanders and are awaiting the winner of the Rangers Devils series. Game 7 is, in fact, tonight. It's going on as we speak. As we tape this podcast. Prince, what is the gauge like with regards to playoff hockey where you are? Are people taking notice to the Hurricanes in Carolina?
Yeah, I mean, I've been busy as of late, but I will say there's a huge hockey market here. I've been playing, some floor hockey here. We just won a tournament, a small tournament. Our team just won. And I've been trying to get into some ball hockey here as well. So there's a lot of transplants, especially from the Boston area, Jersey area. So a lot of hockey fans, people from Wisconsin as well, and certainly some Canadians here and there as well. So, but there's a lot of local fans that are into hockey as well. Surprisingly, as you know, we have plenty of people from our old Colorcast, group, our podcasting group that we had that are from Carolina that are huge fans of the game. And I see it when I've been starting playing lacrosse recently. There's plenty of options to play hockey here. And I see people in restaurants all the time, wearing their Carolina gear. So huge movement here. I'm in Cary, so I'm really close to Raleigh. It's a Raleigh Durham area, and Cary is a huge part of that, quote unquote, like Metroplex. And so huge buzz here. Certainly not the same as Toronto, but for the South, for North Carolina, it is huge. It's pretty big. Like for people who are into hockey with the transplants, or the people who have just, they love the area, grew up here. They are really excited to watch hockey. Like the people in my floor hockey group, people in ball hockey, people in lacrosse, they're just, trying to go to games and trying to tailgate, and they're just, really excited for what's going on in the area.
North Carolina's Bo Jackson down there. Holy cow. Anything else you play? Good for you, man.
I just love playing lacrosse, man. I got laid out a couple times, but I remember from growing up in Toronto, we play, when we were in school. So it's kind of good to, get back into, the native sports that we had growing up.
That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, to hear that there's pickup lacrosse leagues in North Carolina, I mean, that's pretty crazy stuff. I mean, but to circle back to hockey, Prince, I mean, it didn't seem like hockey was really picking up until Dundon bought the team, and then they had the bunch of idiots and I mean, which was once criticized by Don Cherry. They did develop the storm surge, and it seemed like it took 15 plus years. But same thing with Nashville. Nashville didn't really pick up until just recently, and it seems to be a really hot ticket. I was actually in Nashville in December, and there was an afternoon playoff game. I wasn't able to go, and there was a bunch of Predators fans with jerseys on, and they grabbed a bite to eat after the game let out. It seemed like it's the same path between Carolina and Nashville. Would you say?
I'd say that's a really good parallel. That's a really good parallel, especially for a team that was an expansion team at once. Although Carolina was blessed with, certainly winning the cup very, very early on. And the Predators certainly had some great success when they first started, ironically, with the same head coach from Carolina. But yeah, done pick it up, picked up the team. It's certainly been a huge change in the just the psyche of people here in the area. They love it. They love the Carolina Hurricanes. And because I've seen people in restaurants wearing the logo, and I talked to a lot of people, just always being friendly and being personable. And then these people some of these people are not transplants and they're from the area, but they're just ecstatic that they're in the playoffs. And they're worried with that one injury, that the big injury for one of their key players on the roster. So they're worried if they're going to actually win the series, but they're they're hoping that they would pull through. So luckily they have. So it's a good market, surprisingly, for the area. So it's a really good parallel. And I totally agree with the Nashville parallel with Carolina for sure.
Well, one market that has been in flux ever since day one is the Florida Panthers. And they took it to one of the most storied franchises, ironically enough, in NHL history, a team who had the best record in NHL history. The Florida Panthers defeated the Boston Bruins in Game 7 in overtime. And the Bruins, lo and behold, have packed their bags. I mean, Tony, did you even remotely see this as a possibility where Florida was able to defeat the Bruins?
No, of course not. It's a big surprise, obviously. I can't even explain it. I thought the Bruins were looking, 3-1 series lead. It's like you're not. I started wondering if bringing Patrice Bergeron back in the lineup, if that hurt them more than helped them, because they seem to be going on a nice little tilt. They bring Bergeron in the lineup. It came out today that he was playing with a herniated disc. So you have to wonder how much help a player is to you when he's that injured. But credit to the Panthers, man. And they have a good team. I mean, they won the President's Trophy last year, and then they added Matthew Tkachuk. It took them a while to get going. Paul Maurice lit a fire under their ass, ironically, here in Toronto towards the end of the regular season, where you can see the video. It went viral where he was just ripping a new asshole in all of them on the bench. And they snuck into the playoffs thanks to the Penguins folding like cheap suits. and they got the Bruins at a vulnerable time, I guess. But shocking. Now, this just goes to show you that they had a nice goaltending tandem all year, but not a lot of playoff experience with Swayman and Allmark. So they weren't, incredibly sharp. So that might have played a factor. But at the end of the day, it's when you are one of the greatest regular season teams in the history of hockey, you're expected to at least get past the first round, right? I mean, President's Trophy winners don't have, a huge amount of success in the history, but it's a huge surprise for sure.
And you jumped on my next point, and that is the last team who won the President's Trophy with the best record in the National Hockey League in the regular season to win the Stanley Cup was the Chicago Blackhawks, but that was 9 years ago. Ever since then, one team made it to the conference final, but the rest of the teams since those 13 Blackhawks, didn't make it past the second round. You mentioned Tony, Florida were the President's Cup champions in 22. They were out in the second round, and Prince. Now it happened to Boston. Is it bad luck, or is there something really going on? I mean, is the President's Trophy a curse?
Yeah, we've been talking about this topic for years, and surprisingly, you know, the trend has gone the same way, you know, for the last 5 to 10 years. And before I get into that, I really want to quickly say, like, I'm really excited. I'm really happy for Paul Maurice. I think he's underrated, and he's kind of jumped around the league a bit. And I'm really really happy for him that he's gotten some success.
Went to the KHL as well.
Oh yeah, I don't even remember that. So yeah, I mean, he's an underrated coach, and I'm really happy for him to get into the second round. Yeah, I think it's definitely a curse. It's definitely been a curse in the NHL for many years. I think it's just an inflation of your ego. You know, you're playing 80 plus games, and you're really competing for such a long time, and you kind of build an identity thinking like you've accomplished so much. And we've seen teams not wanting to lift up that President's Trophy for many years, you know, because of superstition. So I definitely think it's a curse for sure. Although I will say, you know, there's been many occasions, especially with this Boston team, you know, that you could say it's a little bit more bad luck, because you have 7 games, right? Certainly overall, you know, the history of the playoffs, but they were in it till the end, and they should have, you know, probably won it if it wasn't for the last second goal by the Florida Panthers. And they have that sense of bravado and confidence and swag, like Bergeron, the guys who have already won it, unfortunately beating our own Leafs when we should have probably beat them. But, you know, seeing those big names, Krejci, who's a guy who should not be, you know, forgotten about. And, you know, they could have pulled it off. So I think this year, you'd say that Boston team a little bit more bad luck, but overall, I will say I think it's a bad curse. I think it's just a psychological thing on the ego and just the psyche of the team, and it makes you kind of go into the playoffs feeling like you've already achieved what you needed to achieve and not really hungry for something. And that's the difference in this series. Florida just wanted it way more. And Florida lost a couple key names. Right. I know Tony mentioned it, you know, they had a really good roster last season, but they lost a couple names, but they just really wanted it, and good goaltending as well.
You do have to wonder if by winning the President's Trophy that teams are paying that much more attention to teams. I mean, is that an easy way of saying why first place overall teams have such bad luck in the playoffs? But Tony, do you think that there will be a full examination of this Bruins team? Obviously the regular season was the best that you could ask for, but they didn't get the job done. And does something need to happen for during the offseason for the Bruins?
Well, I don't think a whole heck of a lot. Obviously, Patrice Bergeron and his future is first and foremost. David Krejci, they brought back from Europe to play this season, and he didn't look out of place. It's a good organization, and they do patchwork, they do rebuild, they do development. Probably better than any other team in the league right now. Which is why they're still at the top. So I don't know if obviously you're going to lose Bergeron if he decides to retire. You can't replace a guy like that, but I'm sure they've got a good enough management team where they're going to find the right piece or pieces to kind of, you know, help, which is they've got they've got veterans, they've got young guys. Like I said, this organization does everything really, really well. So I don't think it's the end of the world. I think Prince hit it that, you know, there was a lot of unfortunate to how the Bruins lost as well. Like last second tying goal, and then, you know, once you get to overtime, anything happens. But I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I mean, I would say their organization kind of parallels, talking about parallels again, is it reminds me a little bit like the Red Wings. I mean, especially being an original six franchise, just kind of really cultivating a good management group that really scouts really well, having a good core veteran group that plays two-way hockey, really hard hockey, and playing really good in defensive zone, good goaltending, having quality coaching, and just getting good prospects and kind of making them kind of work their way up into the roster and making them come into the first second line as they progress into their careers. And it's just been a really good system. I hate to say it, I really wanted to see them play us so we can stick it to them hopefully finally after like screwing us over or Kadri's stupid blunders when we should have definitely at least gone further in the playoffs several years ago with Babcock in the fold even. But I'm excited for Florida as well because I used to live down there, been to many Florida Panthers games, and I think going on the road might not be as challenging than going to Boston, which we'll probably talk about.
Well, I mean, you have to think of what the goaltending situation is like. And Prince, you were talking about Detroit, and did Detroit have the goaltending that put them over the edge? I mean, Mike Vernon did win the Conn Smythe the first year. The Red Wings won with during the Yzerman era, but Chris Osgood was goaltender and won. Dominic Hasek was goaltender, and he was well past his days in Buffalo. You take a look at the Cup winners from last year, and Darcy Kemper is not known as an elite level goaltender. This year, Linus Ullmark is a front runner to win the Vezina Trophy for best goaltender, and he didn't even make it past the series. So you think that? Do you think that goaltending is probably a top priority, or do you think they have faith in Ullmark?
You're talking about the Red Wings?
Well, no, Ullmark. I mean, for the Bruins, I mean, going into next year, do you think they're going to stick with Ullmark, or do you think they have to test the free agent market and get a goaltender?
I mean, historically, I haven't been following Allmark too much. Maybe Tony can chime in this a little bit more. Particularly, I mean, we know the goaltending they've had over the years prior to that. That's it's evident, the beast that they have in that. So I mean, with Tuukka Rask, of course, and Thomas. So I mean, but I haven't been following Allmark too much. But historically speaking, they've always spent a lot of time and money on fortifying that position, the Boston Bruins. Yeah, maybe you're right. I think you're right. Fair enough. As far as the goaltending is concerned, the parallel's not 1-to-1 when it comes to the Red Wings. But as far as their structure with defense and having two-way forwards, veterans, and playing in a really good team concept and playing and supporting each other, that's what I was kind of highlighting. But yeah, for sure, I think what I think they'll do is definitely look on the market, look in the draft to see if there's some other opportunities. But I don't know too much about Allmark. Tony probably is better at chiming in here, maybe having some more insight on that.
I don't think they're going to do much at goaltending. First of all, the free agent market is not goaltender rich this offseason anyway, and I would assume their priority will be filling the center ice position if both Krejci and Patrice Bergeron leave. I mean, again, I'm not an insider for the Boston Bruins, but I think they had a really, really, really good season that unfortunately ended really, really, really awful for them. And they're happy with their goaltending, I would imagine. There'd be other priorities, and primarily the center ice position.
Yeah, I'm partly happy because they got checked by the freaking Florida Panthers. Like nobody would even think that, especially going to the Florida Panthers in Sunrise, Florida. I mean, it's not really a huge market until they just started playing really well. And then, of course, good for the Leafs. I mean, for us to kind of be like, fuck the Bruins, man. But, I'm a little upset because I'm like a little bitter because I wish we could play them and stick it to them.
But you want to do the Ric Flair thing, right? To be the man, you got to beat the man, and that's
right, yeah.
But I mean, like, let's call it. Well, I mean, I guess Boston were the men this past season, but I mean, the men is out, and uh, you know, some may say it was of epic proportion. They upset the Florida Panthers were able to accomplish against those very Bruins. One upset that did get overshadowed because of Boston and Florida, in my opinion, were the Seattle Kraken. I mean, the new kids on the block upset the Cup champion Avalanche. I mean, Prince, how overshadowed was this? In fact, I mean, did anybody see Seattle taking it to Colorado? I sure didn't.
I mean, I sure didn't. I mean, they obviously have some skilled forwards. I mean, Eberle's on that team. He's still a good forward, of course. Burkowski, Tanev, Bernays. And so they have some skilled players on that team, especially being an expansion team. You don't really expect it. And Seattle's not never really been a hockey market. I love seeing Seattle on the map, especially. I love the Seattle Supersonics. So I'm really happy. It's exciting for me to see that, and I love their team name and their logo. I will say that did not completely see it coming. All the Avs, they're kind of were playing a little bit, I won't say left-handed, but they lost a big piece. And I know one of the few times that I did hop on the podcast here with you gentlemen is, Tony mentioned maybe the Penguins, picking up Kadri, and losing Kadri has been a huge part of that. He was a huge producer, and going to Calgary is probably bad for him, but the Avs lost quite a bit. And so I'm not totally surprised, but yes, certainly from Seattle, not expected, and it definitely got overshadowed. I think rightfully so with the way, the fashion in which Florida Panthers beat Boston, the President's Trophy winners with the roster they have. So it needs to be definitely on the highlight reels and talked about more in sports media for sure. As we get into the second round, talking about the Kraken and what they've accomplished.
Well, Tony, I gotta say, I'm taking a look at the Kraken roster here, and other than Eberle, maybe Jaden Schwartz, there's just a bunch of guys on this team. I guess maybe Grubauer you could put as one of the leaders of the team, but Mark Giordano, of course, was the first captain of the franchise. He was sent to Toronto. This seems to be
for us, by the way, before you go into that.
Yeah. But I mean, Tony, this is a team that does not have a lot of star power, and they took it to Colorado. What I was going to say was, Florida has Kachuk, Bobrovsky, Aaron Ekblad, the list goes on. Roster for roster, this seems to be a bigger upset.
Well, I mean, the Colorado Avalanche weren't at full strength. I mean, Gabriel Landeskog missing as well, and not having Nazem Kadri there. It's turned out to be a big loss. But yeah, I see what you're saying. I agree with you. And not to mention the Kraken were missing their leading goal scorer. Jared McCann went down in the series as well. Another guy the Penguins let go for absolutely nothing to keep Jeff Carter, which is why Ron Hextall is not employed anymore. But yeah, so there's another guy there. They just play really well as a team. I'm surprised. I mean, I thought the whole process of Ron Francis's building of the team, I thought was odd. And they drafted, oh my God, I forgot his name. Shane Wright. Jesus Christ. That's who dropped the number 4, and he has been absolutely nothing for them. Like they ended up sending him back down to the minors. So you're right, they play really well. I even thought the hiring of Dave Hextall as their coach was a weird one. Came out of left field for me. I was like, I mean, he didn't have the greatest of success in Philly, and he gets this job, but you play as a team. This is what happens, right? Like it's just, this kind of. The team kind of reminds me of that Florida Panther team in '96 that ran to the Stanley Cup final. They got swept by the Avalanche in that final. Uwe Krupp with the overtime winner in Game 4, and they upset the Penguins in the conference final that year. That's what they're kind of looking like to me right now. I'm thinking of them when I watch the Kraken.
Yeah, Krupp was a good international player. I think he was a coach. He's German, I believe, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
German. Small guy, a very small guy.
Yeah, I remember him from international play.
He was about 5'6".
Yeah, but
sitting down.
Quite a career also internationally and certainly as a coach. I mean, talking about parallels, because we love talking about parallels, I'd say this team reminds me from an organizational kind of like the way they've built their rosters. Like there's not too many big names. I think Tanev is still a pretty useful player. I think Burakovsky is a good player. Beniers is a good player as well. But nobody really jumps the page. Maybe Eberle at most, but still nothing to the level of like, McDavid. But they kind of built their team, especially being an expansion team. It kind of reminds me a lot of Las Vegas. I mean, their first roster, and I mean they went to the finals. I mean, they had a lot of people that they're not no names by any stretch of the imagination, but they were just players that were just mid-tier average, and they just had a lot of depth, and they played really good in all three zones. And they were just like that replacement team, like that movie in the with
Keanu Reeves.
People that nobody expected, and it kind of reminds me of that, which I love that narrative. I love that team. I love the organization. I love the team in Seattle. I love the Kraken. It reminds me of the Liquor too. So or in the movie, and so it's really a cool story. And it reminds me of Las Vegas and what they were able to do with that kind of like mid-tier roster, a bunch of kind of, you can call them like no-name guys or just guys that people like forgotten, but actually had some skill. So, let's see what they're able to do. But very impressive, really cool narrative, and I'm excited to see what's going to go on in the second round with that team.
Well, I mean, when they drafted for their expansion roster, I don't recall the names off the top of my head, but I remember that they did have the opportunity to pick up Carey Price. Now, this was before he stepped away from the game, but it was, who knows, maybe they had a chat with Price, and it was the writing was on the wall that he was not going to be playing anymore. But Vegas had the ability to draft Marc-Andre Fleury. They had names, you think of Tuck, you think of a nucleus that went to the final, as you guys mentioned. And
well, just Marchessault, Smith, and Carlson are still aligned from that draft, right? Like they're still together. They still play together. So yeah, and the expansion rules were set up favorably for the Golden Knights. They were able to put together a good team quick as well, and they went for it too. Ron Francis decided to take a different approach, so that's why this is a lot more surprising. That's for sure, because he wanted it to be a little slower and let's put the brakes down, or Vegas wanted to go all in. Excuse the pun. So,
but Tony, to your point though. Seattle's first season compared to this season was a 40-point swing.
Difference. Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah. They're a good team. There's no other way to put it. They play really well together within a structure, within a system. They've got a lot of energy guys like Chris Tanev again. Brandon Tanev, who I was familiar with the Penguins. Of course, I'm sorry I keep bringing up the Penguins, but there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them sprinkled all over the playoffs right now, and it drives me insane. But he's just a pure energy guy. I mean, he's so good to have on your team.
So obviously, with the Kraken and their upset over Colorado, you have Florida and their upset against Boston. The second round marches on. And the Kraken will be facing the Dallas Stars. and of course the Panthers will be playing the Leafs. If you had to choose one or the other, would you put your money on Seattle upsetting Dallas or Florida upsetting Toronto?
Ugh.
Yeah, Tony,
You,
what's your first?
you want that first? That's a great question. And I'm going to say Florida. And the only reason I'm going to say Florida is because I think, the coaching, like Paul Maurice factor, if one of the two was to happen. I think Dallas is a really good team too, a sneaky good team that not a lot of people talk about. Extremely well coached team as well, by Pete DeBoer. But man, you put me in a corner there. So you're telling me I have to pick one of the two upsets?
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, there's no guarantee that either will happen, but
No, yeah.
yeah. But I mean, the reality is that anything can happen in the playoffs. And Prince, I
Yeah.
think Tony makes a valid point that Paul Maurice may have that pedigree to put Florida over the top.
Yeah, I'm very happy for his success. Certainly for that market, I think he's a really good fit for that market. And we've seen, like, he's done some really good things with some organizations unexpectedly. So I do agree with him that Florida over Toronto might be more likely. I'm kind of saying that as like an expectation to kind of like expect the worst, hope for the best, and the Leafs kind of pull it out, kind of like me shutting off the TV,
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
and pulling it off. Even though Tony might be hating on the Leafs, maybe partially.
No, not at
No,
all.
no, no, Tony. No,
not at
I
all.
will speak. I will speak to on Tony's behalf on this one. Him and I went to Montreal for a Leafs Canadiens game, and Tony was all about Toronto. I mean, he does have an affection for Toronto. So Tony, I got your back on this one.
Thank you,
Awesome,
thank you.
awesome, brother.
And there's also something to be said about a team coming in hot to the playoffs. You always, and I think Florida is that they were playing playoff games way before the playoffs started, so they're in that mode, and those are scary teams, especially when you have a Matthew Tkachuk on that team too. Like, I can't even put into words the intangibles he brings, let alone the fact that he's a 100-point scorer. He's just that kind of a player, just a game changer. And yeah,
I will
he's
say,
he's a scary player.
I will say, just
That whole family's scary.
yeah, I mean, I'll say, I mean, Florida over Toronto also, because I mean, I hate to say it, but I mean, we still have to prove ourselves, and maybe I think that's maybe a good frame for us as Leafs Nation, bleeding blue, as always, that we are coming from that perspective of like we still have to prove ourselves, even though we have we're from the Mecca. We're from Toronto. And we're expected to always win. But the way we won that first series, winning those 3 road games in OT, which we never expected to, just the narrative we set. And I think Toronto playing at home, it's always a scary thought for us because the pressure we have at home. I mean, that's just the honest to God truth. I still feel that way. I think people in Toronto still feel that way. Tony, of course, working at Scotiabank Arena, knows that to be the case for sure. It's facts, facts, facts. It's just, I mean, so there's always a chance where that underdog team, that team that's in tropical weather in Florida, in South Florida, which I used to live in, right? Because I went to high school in Palm Beach. They're not expected to trap. They have less pressure on them traveling Toronto, and then Toronto being in a hostile environment with all the pressure every single season, not just being at home with the media. Samsonov, of course, hopefully, can keep it together, but that just plays a huge factor aside from the Paul Maurice. I think that's more of a factor than the Paul Maurice situation, in my personal opinion. So Toronto still has to prove themselves, and they're going to have to make sure they take care of home ice advantage in this series. I think they'll be a little bit more jumpy on the road, but definitely at home. And that's why I feel like Florida over Toronto is definitely more of a likely upset. And I feel Dallas is just a really good team offensively as well.
Well, both series, the Panthers and the Leafs, as well as the Kraken Stars series, will begin tomorrow evening. So, guys, the Edmonton Oilers, of course, are headed to the second round as well. They disposed of the LA Kings and will now play the Vegas Golden Knights. Prince, obviously, Connor McDavid is essentially a man playing with boys in this league. Had an incredible season and will be a lock for the Hart Trophy as league MVP. How crucial was it for McDavid and the Oilers to win this playoff series? Because time is ticking on McDavid, and he does need to start getting some more better results than he has been in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's huge. It really is huge. I mean, especially for that market. They've had they have a lot of young talent aside from just McDavid. Of course, him being one of the most elite, electrifying players you'll ever see on ice ever. Yager had said it when he first started his career. If he could just kind of finish right in front of the net, on those breakaways, he would be unstoppable, which now, of course, he's kind of figured it out and staying healthy, of course. But yeah, I mean, it's huge. It's massive. They have a lot of young cats on that team, of course, the Nugent Hopkins of the world. So, I mean, there's the players on those teams, some big names aside from him as well, so it's huge for that entire core group to finally make it through. I think Evander Kane is just, especially with, a lot of the fallout with his old organization, what had transpired in his personal life with all the gambling, allegations. He's bounced back, and he was really effective last season. But for him to be the way he played on that roster, he seems like he's in fresh in mind, really, really in a good headspace, and he played really well, extremely good. And that team was just looked really solid, especially with the young talent that have huge for that roster, huge for that city, especially being in Canada. And I'm sure Gretzky is really excited and doing interviews over there, and just really good for Canada and really good for McDavid in that roster.
Well, I mean, Tony, the Oilers did have well over 100 points this past regular season, but are they in a situation where if they don't make a conference final or more, that heads may turn? Like how safe would like a Jay Woodcock be to return next season? Ken Holland as general manager. You have the best player in the world, and if they can't make a conference final at least, then you'd have to think that decisions have to be made.
Well, I think the franchise is really stable now, and it hasn't been in a while, right? You remember that stretch they had where they were constantly picking first overall, and it just wasn't working out for them. And turnover in coaches, who's going to run this team? I think Kenny Holland's safe, and Woodcock, I think, will be fine too. They're playing a tough team, right? Like a very motivated team, Vegas. Another well-coached team. They lucked into Bruce Cassidy last offseason when Boston shockingly fired him. And they have, the Marian Hossa of the modern day in Stone, who's back and healthy for the playoffs, and that's a huge lift for them. I always say the great ones eventually win the championships. If this is not the year, I think McDavid will still get a chance. And we keep talking about Batman, but don't shit on Robin there, because Leon Draisaitl is a phenomenal hockey player, and he was probably the more productive player, because Matthew Deneau in the first round, who's a very good defensive forward for the Kings, did a pretty decent job on McDavid. I mean, you obviously can't stop him, but he annoyed him enough to. But man, Draisaitl was open and scored some big goals for that team. Again, I don't think there's going to be a lot of turnover. Now, the goaltending might be an issue because they have Jack Campbell on a 5-year deal, $25 million, and he's not the starter right now. Stuart Skinner is, and it's his net. And, he's a rookie. His experience is, obviously limited. So there's going to be some issues there moving forward if, the goaltending turns out to be bad for the Oilers in this round.
Yeah, I forgot Dreisaitl's name too. I mean, that just goes to my point. Like, that core young group of players, there's just so many good names. If one guy is not performing to their peak performance, then another guy needs to pick up. And they finally, push through that barrier. So it's huge for those guys, especially as young men who are friends of each other in the organization.
It's going to be an incredibly tight series, I think. It's going to be a fun series to watch too. There's a lot of good players on both sides there.
So, what's your prediction, guys, for the Canadian teams? Oilers versus the Golden Knights and the Leafs and Panthers. Who do you got winning, and how long is it going to take them?
Sorry. Go ahead, Prince.
I'd say, I'm gonna say Leafs in 6. Cross my fingers in 6. I kind of wanted to say 7, but I want to stay away from the 7th game as a Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm gonna say in 6. Just to be humble, I think the Oilers. I think they win it in 6 also. Actually.
Okay. All right, Tony.
I like Leafs in 6 too, and you know what? I'm going to go Oilers in 7. But that's I'm not 100% convinced of that because I like that Vegas team too. But I'll go Oilers in 7 just for Canadian karma.
Yeah,
that's got up playing that team is really good defensively. I mean, they haven't been putting up too many shots, but Cassidy's is shown that he is, as you said, surprise firing in Boston because he's got really good defensive structure and that team is bought in and they will defend for the.
And he has a very good blue line too, led by Pietrangelo. So it's gonna be a tough series.
I do have the Oilers in 7 as well. I'm going to go Leafs in 5.
Ooh.
Don't ask. Well, yeah, it's a bold one, but I don't know. Just something about this Leafs team. Sure they scratched and clawed, and it didn't go 7. But those overtime wins, the resiliency. I mean, they're getting it from other key pieces. Matthews is obviously stepping up large.
Warner is playing great. I mean, Luke Shen is such a great pickup, a stalwart back there. I mean, Ryan O'Reilly, of course, his influence. Morgan Riley just showing up in the blue line, especially with all the bad turnovers he's had in previous seasons in the playoffs. So I can see it, and I'm hoping for it, man. I'm hoping for 5.
Yeah, okay. You bring up Luke Shen, and one thing that really did get to me, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but when he dropped the mitts with Tanner Jeannot, the game was well out of reach. And I don't know about you two. I don't think fighting moves the needle any way, shape, or form. I think that you're in the playoffs. You're going to be putting your body on the line so many times in the first place. Why are you going to potentially injure yourself more by scrapping a guy when there's nothing else to prove? Sorry, someone was going to say something?
No. Oh, no, sorry. I didn't know you. I thought you were finished. Keep going.
No, essentially, no, I was just going to rant on even more to tell you the truth. I mean, Luke Shen is an important cog in that blue line. You are not gaining anything if you are the Toronto Maple Leafs to engage in that fight at that moment in time.
Yeah, I still think there's a place for it. For a team like the Leafs, especially, in addition, like Luke Shen, you saw the way he handled himself in that series. There's, of course, the famous video of him just standing in between the benches, just looking at Maroon and Hagel and just chirping away at them with that smirk on his face. that was a presence the Leafs needed, and that physicality part of it is always something that, Leaf fans complain that they don't have. So here they are and they have it, and now they're complaining that there might be too much of it. Typical Leaf fans. Sorry, go on.
Prince, we can't make up our mind. Where do you stand on this topic?
We don't mind that. We don't mind that. Yeah, I mean, I agree with both of y'all to a certain extent. I'm kind of on both sides. I think there's definitely a need for that presence with the Leafs, especially with Tampa Bay being instigators, as Sheldon Keefe had said, manipulating the refs as they're a championship team, trying to get calls and penalties or just trying to get under the skin of Toronto. So it's extremely important. Yeah, picking up a guy like Luke Schenn, you definitely want to see him, be physical with the opposition. So there's definitely a need for that kind of physicality with fighting. But certainly when the series is over, it's definitely an injury risk. But I mean, it goes to the point, like, the size, which Tony had kind of alluded to very, very, very briefly. But it's really good to see Sheldon Keefe being very, very smart with the decor. Like, we invested in Luke Schenn, and we have a really, really big defensive core. And I think that proved to be extremely useful against a team skilled like Tampa. Yes, we got shot on quite a bit in that series, and we were kind of holding on for dear life. But that decor really held up. They were able to clear, get pucks out of the zone, and they were really physical with a really good deep roster, a team of forwards that really can bash down low. So Luke Schenn, along with the rest of that blue line, just a great great a bunch of additions by Dubas. So he just brought that physicality, and the rest of that depth they have in the blue line is so fantastic for us.
Well, will the second round be as exciting as the first? If that's the case, then it's going to be some very exciting hockey this coming round for the playoffs. Guys, we're going to end things off the way that we usually end things off here on What's Up the Sports podcast, and that's do a little rapid fire that I like to call Big Deal, No Big Deal. You two know the drill. I'm going to pose a scenario to you, and you're going to tell me if it's intriguing or if you don't really care about it. So, Prince, the Raptors have fired their head coach who led them to the NBA championship. That, of course, is Nick Nurse. And the club has been granted permission to speak with a bunch of candidates. One of them is Becky Hammon, who led the Las Vegas Aces to the WNBA Championship this past season. At this point, there hasn't been an official interview process, but to consider Becky Hammon for a head coaching position, is that a big deal or no big deal?
It's a very big deal. I mean, both sides of it. Losing Nick Nurse, a guy who's took the team to their first NBA Finals and winning their first championship, mind you, with Kawhi Leonard, and still having a successful couple runs and a really good good team production with him as the head coach. So I mean, losing a guy like that, it's huge. And then of course hiring a woman as your head coach in Toronto and in the NBA, that's big news. That's huge news. I mean, I'd love to actually see it. I mean, I don't know too much about her resume, personally, but I think it'd be cool, especially with a team like Toronto, which is an expansion team, and we are in Canada, so we are a hockey culture first. But of course, the Raptors have kind of stormed over the city over the years. But it would be a cool market to kind of definitely try it out. And I think, I'd love to see someone, a woman coach, to definitely succeed as a head coach in Toronto. That'd be really, really just cool for just the city and for the franchise. but it's extremely big news. But losing Nick Nurse and potentially hiring a new coach, a woman that's never coached in the NBA, so definitely big.
Well, as a head coach, I mean, now, Tony, the reason why I think this is more intriguing, more than anything else, is that Becky Hammon has won a championship as leading the Las Vegas Aces. She spent how many years as an assistant under Greg Popovich, perhaps one of the greatest head coaches in NBA history.
Not aware.
Yeah, you think of candidates like Ime Udoka from who was in Boston, led the Celtics to the finals, but then he obviously was turfed for being a naughty boy. But then Joe Mazzulla comes in and he has a great season. You think of Nick Nurse. Nick Nurse was in the Dwayne Casey regime. Somebody has not convinced me that Dwayne Casey couldn't have coached that Raptors team to the championship. Nick Nurse did not win a playoff series without Kawhi Leonard. All of his playoff success was that 18-19 season. The one person who I think is intriguing is Jerry Stackhouse. He won a G League championship with Raptors 905, maybe even came across, I believe Siakam and Van Vliet were in the system when Stackhouse was a coach. I know I'm throwing a lot of different scenarios and basically word vomiting the past couple of minutes. But where do you think the Raptors may go to as in finding that new coach?
I think they'll go young. I think they'll go someone who's on the rise. It's kind of where Nick Nurse was when they hired him. Now, Udoka went to Houston. He ended up in Houston, and apparently that was Nick Nurse's spot, But I think they'll go young because I think they're going to go young in terms of players. I think we're going to see a rebuild. I think you'll see some heavy-duty roster changes. So it wouldn't make sense to bring in a veteran to coach a young team, I don't think. I think you want to try and bring someone to grow with the team. But I'm not 100% sure. I'm just taking a wild stab.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say, if I may, real quick, is I want to say thank you to Nick Nurse. I mean, he's just, I think, yes, he did have Kawhi, but they were really good in the playoffs even after Kawhi left. Certainly, he left his imprint with the confidence that they were able to have after Kawhi helped them win the championship. But Nick Nurse had some really good adjustments, some zone coverage, changes, definitely, against Milwaukee Bucks, which we struggled with first in that finals run. So he's a really good technical coach, a really good guy. People love him. His story's fantastic. He's a Chicago native, and I hope he gets another opportunity. I'm sure he will in the NBA. You gotta love the guy. But I love the idea of Jerry Stackhouse as well. I mean, I've always been a fan. He's always been really a hard-nosed guy. I'd say a stalwart as well. I think he's well respected in the NBA. So aside from any other potential candidates, the name you're throwing out there, I'd love to see Jerry Stackhouse. I think that'd be really cool. I think the players would love him as a coach too, and definitely want to see him. Maybe try to get a shot in the NBA for sure.
Yeah, I definitely think Stackhouse, let alone Becky Hammon, will get that opportunity, whether it's with Toronto. That remains to be seen. I mean, Tony, you did bring up, veteran coaches and leading young teams, and such was the case in Calgary, where the Flames fired head coach Darryl Sutter. Calgary was definitely thrown a huge wrench when Matthew Tkachuk, let alone Johnny Gaudreau, wanted to trade. They barely made it into the playoff. They barely lost out in qualifying in the playoffs, and now they're looking for a new bench boss. Was it much of a surprise to see Sutter go? Because Calgary did have a lot to get over by losing their two big pieces in Gaudreau and Tkachuk.
Well, it was a surprise it didn't happen the day after the season. The fact that it happened today is confusing because, I was under the understanding that the reason why Brad Treliving was not brought back is because he no longer wanted to work with Darryl Sutter. So I had assumed that Darryl Sutter had won the tug of war between the two. Now I always find it confusing why a team would fire a general manager and keep the head coach. I'm bringing up the Penguins again, but that's exactly what they've chosen to do, and I don't have a problem with that because I think Mike Sullivan's a good coach. He just needs to get a better roster with to surround the core. But it was an extremely confusing thing that happened because it from my point of view, that Calgary Flame team should have been good enough to make the playoffs. I was a huge fan of how Brad Treliving handled last offseason after the shock of losing Gaudreau and Tkachuk. I thought he did very well for himself. That team is a playoff team. So therefore, in my opinion, it was Darryl Sutter who lost that room. So I totally expected him to be gone right away. Now you've lost a good general manager, and eventually you fire the coach. So I'm very confused at what's happening in Calgary. But the good news is it looks like they'll be getting a new arena. So that's, finally a good thing for them there. But it was, I was confused by it.
Yeah, I mean the Sutters don't last in Calgary for some reason, even his brother. But I will say I don't want to call you guys out, but one of the times that we're on this show, I did say you guys did ask about losing Tkachuk and Gaudreau on that roster. What did I say? I said it's a bad move for Calgary to lose them. So I'm glad you're saying that now.
Well, yeah, you'd rather keep him, but under the circumstances, what he managed to get. When you sign Nazem Kadri, you bring in Jonathan Huberdeau, you bring in Mackenzie Weegar. Those are three very good NHL players. So I thought they were still good enough to be, a playoff team, right?
Nobody expected very quickly. Nobody expected Huberdeau to have that dog of a season.
It was like a 55-point drop or something like that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean with Kadri, the point is, and we're kind of nitpicking here, but with Kadri, he's already kind of proven himself and kind of going into Calgary. I don't.
Did he really prove himself? Because he had a hell of a playoff run with Colorado, but he wasn't the guy in Toronto.
Yeah,
he has to be the guy in Calgary.
Yeah, he was. He did have a breakout season, a fantastic season with the Avs. Unexpectedly with that kind of point production. But sorry to interrupt once again. But you have McKinnon and Landeskog. How are you not going to have a hell of a season? Yeah, he was playing on a third line in Toronto, so fair enough. But you didn't expect that kind of offensive production still. You still got to produce, you still got to play. You can have good line mates, but you still got to be able to put the puck in the net, make plays, and he was able to do that. We were not expecting that kind of offensive output when he got signed by the Avs for sure. Not an 80+ point production season. And going to Calgary, I don't know if Calgary was really the right market, at least with his first season, for him to continue to prove himself, as you're trying to emphasize. But losing to those two guys, and to Tony's point, they got some good players in return. But those are two young cats, that Tkachuk and Gaudreau, that I think if they would have stayed on that team, certainly would be good for that team because they're young. But Sutter, unfortunately, they just don't last in Calgary. That's just really what it comes down to. He's not for everyone. He's an interesting personality. He's not for everyone, and I guess he lost the locker room.
Well, you have to wonder if it is out with the old, in with the new. And to Prince Antoni's point, it seemed that Father Time is definitely catching up to Darryl Sutter. So very quickly, of course, the Leafs will be playing the Florida Panthers in the second round of the playoffs. And it was announced that residents in Canada were banned from purchasing tickets for games 3 and 4, which will be in South Florida, in an effort to get Panther fans first crack in purchasing tickets. It's really intriguing to me because I still think that Leaf fans are going to do whatever it takes to get their hands on tickets, but may have to pay a premium. Prince, is that going to deter Leaf fans? I mean, this effort to get Florida fans first crack of games 3 and 4, is that a big deal or no big deal?
It's a big deal in a way, but I'm gonna say it's no big deal. I mean, Toronto Maple Leafs, baby, we everywhere in South Florida, all the snowbirds. I mean, going to games over the years there. I mean, there's plenty of people who just go to Florida Panthers game. In fact, there might be a little bit more Leafs fans or Canadian fans, to some of those games. I'm sure the locals have started to appear at the games ever since the Panthers started to play well in the playoffs. But it's definitely not going to deter any of our Leafs fans, especially living down there, going to games down there. Aside from the snowbirds who are already present, who are going to be definitely attending the games, they probably don't have to wait 24 hours. I find that a little crazy. So, I mean, as much as I say it's not a big deal, it's a bit of a big deal being originally from Toronto. And if I was to put myself in your shoes, Randy, and want to go to the game, it'd probably piss me off. I should be able to access these tickets myself and fly out. But Leafs Nation's traveling everywhere. They're already there. They're going to swarm Florida, especially after getting the monkey off the back. We're going to go nuts in Florida. It's going to happen. Not going to deter Leafs Nation whatsoever from attending those road games at all.
Tony, I got to say, though, I think one reason why Leaf fans may get their hands on tickets because the Miami Heat is still playing in the second round, and they're playing against the New York Knicks. I have always been skeptical of fans, sports fans in South Florida. Panther games is not a place to be seen. Miami Heat games is the place to be seen, and I don't think this is going to move the needle at all.
Well, I mean, they don't even sell out Miami Heat games. I think Miami's probably one of the worst sports towns in all of America.
Florida is one of the most professional sports town. It's more of a college sports town.
Yeah. And if the Florida Panthers want to ensure that, most of their arena have people dressed up as empty seats, then I would advise them to continue this, what they're attempting to do. It's not going to work. They shouldn't do that because the idea is to get as many asses in the seats as possible so they can buy, their Bud Lights and whatever the hell and ensure the franchise makes some money while they cover these playoff games. They're going to give it the old college try, but it's not going to work out like Prince said. But you're also taking a risk at having empty seats in an arena, which is very possible, very realistic in places like Sunrise, Florida, and South Beach. Not the greatest sports fans. So you want to get whoever the hell you can into those arenas as possible. Miami Heat are a great story, by the way, too.
Yeah, I mean, they had they took game 1 against the Knicks, and great to see Kyle Lowry have a great game. 4 blocks for Kyle Lowry in game 1. That was great.
And the NBA had their version of the President's Trophy winners go out in the first round. This is the first time since 2012 that's happened at the NBA, NHL same year.
I think the Western Conference. Is it the Western Conference is represented by every seat? What was it? It was
I think it's 1, 4, and 6 and 7 right now.
And isn't the Eastern Conference 2, 8? I think 1 through 8 is represented in both conferences, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah? I thought I saw a stat first time in history there. So I mean, maybe who knows? Maybe the Raptors will make it back to the promised land in the NBA Finals, and maybe Toronto, the Leafs, could do something against those very Florida Panthers. Look, guys, obviously with everything that took place in the with the short turnaround of the Leafs and the playoff series, so incredibly grateful for you guys to join me. It's going to be one hell of a playoff run. And Tony Antoniou, Prince Matalia, thank you so much as always.
Anytime, man.
I had a blast, man. I'm looking forward. This is the perfect way to segue into round two. So great time. Thanks for having me again.
The pleasure is mine. So for Tony Antoniou and Prince Matalia, I'm Randy Kure. This is What's Up the Sports podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk to you next time.